Oklahoma statehood was one of those questions that really impacted the tribes that were here in Indian Territory. There was a big push by tribes to try to create an Indian state, if you will, where the tribes were still allowed to maintain their sovereignty and function as independent tribes, but have the same rights as states, and that did not happen. In the 1930s, Indian policy had a big shift. Previously, for the past several decades, the policy had been one of assimilation. That's how we had the reservations broken apart, and that's how you saw the big push for mission schools to educate children in a Western fashion. In the 1930s, the federal government looked and realized that the policy of allotment was a complete disaster. And so in the 1930s, 1934 specifically, the Indian Reorganization Act was passed. That put an end to the allotment process. It also had a condition in which tribes were able to have constitutions that re-recognized tribal governments and set these governments up in a manner that looked much more like the U.S. government, so that the federal agents would know who to deal with and how to engage with these governments in a way that they would find convenient. We decided to name the final gallery Seventh Generation to tie it back to our first gallery, where we're talking about the Seven Fires prophecy and that final prophecy that there will be a generation that comes along and goes back along the path of the ancestors, and they pick up the things that our ancestors were forced to put down, and they relearn the language and practice ceremonies and hold sacred those things that our ancestors were not able to carry with them through the removals and through the efforts from the federal government. And we believe that we are the beginning, we're in the early stages of that seventh fire.
Yeah, there was specific symbolism that we wanted to create in the architectural design, but we have to understand that we already had a footing in place, that we really couldn't breach past the walls of the museum or the dedicated gallery space. But we definitely wanted to add symbolism to it that was pertinent to each message and subject matter that was built within each gallery. The artifacts that we selected are kind of the breadth of our collection, especially having been removed so many times. The artifacts that were accumulated and preserved over the years are specifically from this community. So from the developments of commerce, government, things like that, we were really lucky in what we had to select from. So we really span the time period from the community's establishment here in Indian Territory up to today. The large sweetgrass braid was obtained by the CHC from the Walpole Island community at the Gathering of Potawatomi Nations. The braid itself symbolizes the use of sweetgrass, and that it's burnt as a medicine to help purify surroundings for new beginnings. And we feel that the gallery denotes just that. The way we incorporate 21st century elements into the gallery, primarily through digital interactives. We wanted to do that so that we could delve deeper into subject matter that we weren't able to do physically on the floor because of architectural limitations in space. But it also gives us an option as a staff to be able to conduct more research, to create more educational platforms for people to understand who they are as Potawatomi people. But one of the primary goals is so that we can reach out to varied audiences from different age groups to knowledge bases, whether they're native or non-native, so that everybody feels included.
We also tried to bring in modern Sepian history and what we're doing here at the Nation by having the language kiosk. People love to learn a word or two of Potawatomi, so we wanted to incorporate that and make it fun with fun interactive games.
I worked with Nathan to create the game interactive, and what we really did was he asked me for a group of words, and I gave him some different words in the Potawatomi language, and we created something that we hoped would be fun and engaging. It's important to incorporate the language throughout the museum because the language, again, was a gift to us from the Creator, and it's that thing it's that essence that makes us who we are. You know, it's our common blood, it's our stories, it's our dances, it's our food, it's our ceremonies. All these things make us Potawatomi, our history, but it's the language that truly ties it all together.
So our ancestors, when they felt challenged or they felt wronged by the Indian agent or someone else in the government, they were not hesitant to fight for their rights. In this time period around the turn of the century, the early 1900s into the teens, we start to see more and more letter writing where they are absolutely going around the Indian agent and saying he's not listening to us and we can't get any kind of redress for our grievances, so I'm going to write a letter directly to the Commissioner of Indian Affairs or the Secretary of the Interior or directly to the President of the United States. So our ancestors weren't afraid to learn their rights, fight for their rights, and encourage their children and the people around them to also fight for their rights. At around this time period, we started to get federal legislation that was promoting the concept of tribal self-governance. It was really once the government embraced the idea that tribes not only could govern themselves, but should govern themselves, that tribes, in particular the Citizen Potawatomi for our region, really started to thrive. Before self-governance, we had a few acres left that were owned by the tribe. We had a few $100s to our name. We were in a real state of crisis. We were at a point where it was even being questioned whether or not we would continue to be a federally recognized tribe. After self-governance and after the tribe was able to take control of some of those federal dollars and have the say on how they would be spent in our community, it all started to change for us. We tried to convey that concept in the museum by having what we call the document tornado.
I think as a staff we call it the docunado. It's just a funny term that we apply to it. But really what it's meant to symbolize is sort of the whirlwind or the storm of paper that seemed to dictate this time period, and that members of the community were filing complaints, corresponding with government officials, corresponding with themselves, so that they could settle and have a rightful place as a community. I think we chose to display Sharon's images and her beautiful photographs in the gallery to help detail that there are still cultural practices retained and still ongoing in the community, and people take a lot of pride in those. And being able to dress out for gatherings, for festival that we host here, and the beautiful works of art that people create to express themselves and their Potawatomi heritage.
One of the challenges of this last section of the museum is that it's talking about modern CPN history, and modern CPN history is constantly changing. It's changing on an almost weekly basis, and so we really wanted to utilize a interactive for this section because it could be changed quickly. We wanted to have a map that could show the different enterprises that existed on that exist on the reservation and show the growth that is coming down the pike and the things that we know that are going to be changing in the near future, because we always want people to be able to see that Citizen Potawatomi Nation history isn't something that's just of the past. It's not stagnant. Our future is bright, and there are a lot of things that are coming in the future that are going to allow us to become an even greater representation of what a truly sovereign nation is, and we're going to be able to meet the needs, constantly growing and changing needs of our tribal community and the community around us here in Shawnee and in Potawatomi County.
Yeah, the enterprise map, that started as just like, hey, we want to be able to show people what else is in the area, what else do we offer. And we wanted to include as many, if not all, of the enterprises, as we could. And not all of them are listed currently. It's still a work in progress, as most things here are. And so like maybe the Grand isn't on it because it's a smaller map. The Grand is kind of out there, but there is an icon for the Grand, so you can click on it, get its hours, its like a description of it, a photo of it, directions for that particular one. We just wanted to give people an idea of like, hey, if you liked what we did here at the museum, maybe you'll like what we've done over here at maybe the grocery store with that redesign, or hey, maybe you want something to eat. Here's Fire Lake Pizza.
Well, the picture of the trailer, I think, is extremely symbolic for the community here. Everybody recognizes it, especially people who have grown up here and were able to witness the trailer or visited the trailer, but also the stories that are told either by the chairman or by elders in the community about the trailer and what it meant, and that it was the starting point for the tribe as we know it today.
We decided to represent another big change for the Citizen Potawatomi in the last section of the museum as you're about to leave. We looked at how we could talk about the constitutional change that happened in the early 2000s. We decided to set it in front of a full wall mural of the trailer that was the tribal headquarters in the late 70s. We really wanted to show that juxtaposition from the tribe going from having almost nothing to having real control over the shape and the format of our government with those constitutional changes, where we pushed the Department of Interior out of the decision-making process. We wrote them out because we don't need them to make amendments to our Constitution. We made the decision to try to represent as many Citizen Potawatomi as we could by having the regional representation from our legislators. And we really wanted to show that this is what success looks like. It is going from being reliant on the federal government to even provide us a place to have a headquarters, to now making sure that the voices are heard from tribal members all over the United States, and that we are able to fully represent the needs of our community far and wide in serving the Potawatomi people in the best way we possibly can. We really wanted to highlight some material culture, which is more of a challenge than you would think because people don't want to give their things that they're still using over to the museum. So we were able to convince Chairman Barrett to let us borrow some of his regalia that he's worn in the powwow grounds for grand entry for several years. We also were able to ask one of our tribal members to make a set of women's regalia. Not only does this allow us to show modern Citizen Potawatomi culture and history, but it also allows us to tie back through the rest of the galleries the clothing that we've displayed going all the way back to the pre-contact village scene. And it just is one of those continuous things that you see throughout the museum.
I think for people both who have grown up here and who are from Shawnee and those who are not, they see the tribe as extremely prosperous and on an upward trend, but they probably don't realize the hardships that the community had to face and the struggles that previous leaders and community members had to endure and work through to create the platform for which the tribe is more or less built on today. But the gallery itself just celebrates those successes, honors those hardships, and lets people understand that they are part of a bigger community, community of strength, endurance, and perseverance.